right, guys. Hey, we're back, and sorry to disappoint you. It's just the two of us today.
Yeah, we've had a lot of really great people come on recently. But some good news for people who are just listening, if you want to see what our ugly mugs look like. Hey, we're on YouTube now, so we're doing a recording video. So if you prefer YouTube, we heard quite a few people say, hey, we want video. So we got video. We only have one camera right now, so hey guys, from the one camera. But as you know, our podcast grows, we'll definitely be adding cameras and the whole extra equipment and all that other stuff. So,
God knows you guys want a closer view of our faces.
this is the best view that we could give you guys. So. Anyways, enough of that shit.
Yeah. So, anyways, hey guys, today, Josiah and I, we missed kind of just rapping with each other. It's really nice talking with people and really getting insight into people, but we kind of miss expressing ourselves as well. So we wanted to take an episode to do that as well. So today we are talking about ego.
Yeah.
And just kind of diving into it, talking about there's a lot of different views of ego. The first thing that I'm wondering, because I'm sure you have a more...
Don't say... a more refined version or something like that, because I don't.
I feel like you do. I feel like you probably have read something about it that I haven't. But how would you describe ego? I know there's a lot of people think of it different ways. They just think, like, if you think, most people, they think, hey, he has a big ego, it means he's cocky or something, he's conceited or something, or she's. But there's a lot more to it than that. Yeah,
I don't have a negative perspective on ego. Ego is just like anything else with our personalities. It can be a good thing or a bad thing. A high-performing athlete has to have a fairly high ego, right? But when you turn that into the business world and that person's ego starts like, no, I'm the absolute best, like, fuck you. And then it's all of a sudden like, okay, that's some bullshit. So as far as I understand ego, it is the definition, or not the exact definition, but paraphrasing what it is. It's essentially like your driving force for self-gratification or understanding of your identity. So I could be completely misspeaking that. I think I'm looking over here. I see Flock Googling.
No. I'm looking back on, I think it was the first blog I posted, or maybe it was the second one. I'm trying to look. One of them, I kind of dove in on my own ego, and I was trying to look at which one it was so I could remember. But I know it was one of my favorite pieces that I've written on it. But
it's interesting being video recorded at the same time. Normally we can get away with this shit with just typing things up, because we don't have like a Jamie like, hey, could you look that up for us while we keep talking? And we're sitting here, we're typing ego. It's funny.
Yeah. It is what it is. But, and I mean, the way I would describe the ego is, for me, I think I tend to think of it more of a negative thing than a positive thing, but it's one of those things that it's a really hard thing to balance. It's kind of, it's so... it's so finicky, it's so fickle. Like, you could go on one side of the ego so easily, and you can go on another side of the ego so easily. And I'm more afraid of going on the side of my ego running wild and making me be disillusioned with things in a more of a positive way than they actually are. Me thinking things maybe are better, thinking that I'm better at something than I actually am. I would rather have the more realistic perspective of things, and I would rather err on the side of thinking a little bit less of myself than thinking a little bit more of myself.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of the other way. Some people might say might think that I have a big ego, but I actually don't. Surprisingly, my ego tries to over display because of the lack of self-esteem that sometimes I might feel. So I'm the other way. So sometimes I actually try to push that ego a little bit more so that I am at least appearing confident, right? Like, I think that's the common thing people do. But the psychoanalysis of it is part of the mind that mediates the conscious and the unconscious, and is responsible for reality testing in the sense of personal identity. So sense of self-esteem and self-importance, like I was saying earlier, is a fairly, I paraphrased what the actual textbook definition of it is, right? But here, I'm going to close these blinds.
Okay. Yeah, I was seeing it in your eyes right there. Yeah, I was looking. I was like, man, that can't be comfortable. Yeah, That's a good lot of words to describe it, but
Yeah.
it really it's the way we see ourselves, like how we view ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, and that's really it. Whether it's good or bad. And it's like you said about having how people may think you have a big ego, but it's because that maybe you have a lower self-esteem. And I think I see that a lot. I see a lot of people with the biggest egos also have the most fragile egos. They're easily broken, and it's almost like more of a, when you go on that side of the ego, on the more of the I guess the upper side of it, I would say, it's more of like a puffing of the feathers or puffing of the chest and stuff like that.
I'm guilty of that for sure.
We all are.
Yeah.
And I am for sure. But it's also one of my biggest fears. So I think I probably don't do it as much because I'm constantly checking myself on it because I really don't want it.
I can see that about you.
Yeah.
You're like, someone's like, oh, look how great he is. And you're like, oh, shut up. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just don't want to end up with a big head. I don't want to be disillusioned. And I'd rather have a really realistic view of myself than not. And I'd rather think less of myself and prove myself wrong. And which is what I like to do. I like to think like, I'm probably not as good as these guys, but I'm going to give this my best shot, whatever it is. And then come out or just think like, I don't know how good I am. Let's see. And let's prove it, having no expectation, and see like I am only what I do. That's pretty much it. I'm only what I do, not what I think I am.
Yeah, and sometimes it's interesting because I see a lot of the posts online for this topic of ego, and everybody's like, kill your ego, and I'm like, if you didn't have that ego, you'd just be laying around on your couch all day long eating potato chips and watching nothing. Like I think ego plays a different part of the brain of like self-accomplishment. It's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know what that is. But like on the base level, it's like the fundamental needs, like shelter, food, things like that. Then you move a little higher, and that's friendship and love and sense of security, long-term security. And then you get to the final top, and that's self-actualization. That's that identity of your core self. And it's part of this, like, you're going to satisfy the bottom needs first, but sometimes if you don't have that upper one, the self-actualization, you don't get the bottom things. Like I think it's definitely, like you said, it's something that you have to watch out and try to keep in check, but not something that you have to completely kill.
Yeah,
I think those social media posts are stupid, personally.
Yeah, and that's going back to what I said, where most people think when you think of ego, you just think of somebody who's full of themselves,
egotistical,
And
right.
but I think that is because more times than not, that's where the ego really comes out. That's where it's really visible, in stuff like that. So that's what people will really kind of talk about it more in that sense.
Yeah.
Than the other sense. It's kind of hard to. I think most of us, myself included, don't really have a clear picture of what ego really is. There's ego, there's a super ego, there's all kinds of stuff. It gets really technical, and it's
Freud making it super difficult for all of us.
Yeah. Thanks, smart people. But there's a few things that I can see with myself when I know that my ego is kind of running me. And I'm talking more of the upper side of it, more of my ego thinking it's a little bit better than what I am. And one of the big things is, biggest thing I hear, and I don't say it out loud because I know I hate it, but I hear it in my head. And it's whenever somebody says, or I say in my head, like, I deserve so-and-so, like I deserve blank, I deserve blank. Anytime, I really believe that anytime you say that, you probably don't deserve it. Like I really like to believe fundamentally, not emotionally, and subconsciously, but I really like to believe fundamentally that I don't really deserve anything that I don't have. Like if I haven't gotten it, then I don't deserve it. If I've gotten it, then I deserve it. But if I haven't, then I need to probably work a little bit harder at whatever it is, or I got to continue working before I deserve it.
Yeah, it's actually making me think of a different conversation that me and Hannah have had recently. We're with our business, Odin Marketing House, we're trying to find like that sweet spot for prices. And, you know, sometimes we'll price something and we'll be like, that was a good price. Like, okay, it was worth the work. We do the hours of how long it takes to do something, but we're constantly have to readjust. One of the things Hannah was suggesting to me is I've been employed by somebody my entire life, right? And finally I'm now self-employed, right? And it's that mindset of an employee versus the mindset of a business owner. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of you are worth whatever the market is willing to pay you. If the market won't pay you more, it's nice that you think you're worth more than that, but you're not. But Hannah had a very good point that there's like this tug of war almost, where if you believe that you're only worth a little and you act like it, and this is where some of that ego comes in. If you know that, like, no, I'm worth more. And you constantly like, no, like this, like, I'm not a junior designer. I'm not a junior SEO person. I'm an absolute expert. Like, I'm going to do this. And, you know, this is how much time it takes to do my job. I deserve this much money. You don't want it? Bye. And then eventually, as those jobs come in, you have that different perspective of it. So it's a little bit more of the ego side that she's suggesting to be a more successful business owner. And I'm looking at from a statistical marketing, you know, free market kind of perspective. And it's interesting that within that conversation about just pricing, it's all about the ego. Like, that's the whole conversation about it's like this conversation wrapped, you know, ego's wrapped around everything else. It's a much bigger conversation.
Yeah.
But we're having it in a small term, you know. It's interesting.
Yeah. And like you said, it's everywhere. It's within everything. And I think with that, kind of both of you are right with how to do that.
That's usually the case, isn't it?
Yeah. There's always some truth in each side, you know. But I'm not a business owner, but from the things that I do know about running a business, I would say that, like, Hannah's point is a great point, but you can only do that after you are set in a position that you can do that, right? So you kind of have to do what you did. So this is what I did with my clients and doing personal training, was that I started at a pretty low price, right? With like the first person who approached me, which I never even gave any thought that like I never thought that I was worth, you know, doing personal training for somebody. Somebody came up and asked me. Then started working with him personally, and he got much better, like in a short amount of time. And everybody was kind of asking, like, "Hey, what happened? Like, how'd you get so good?" Then he kind of was like a testimonial thing, and then people started hitting me up and wanted to do more personal training, and it was fine. I was charging the same price, and then it got to be like kind of a lot. And I was like, I would rather have less clients to pay me more. So I didn't raise the prices on the people who I had, but every new client that came in, I would tell them, hey, okay, this is what the price is. And then they would take it. So I'd be like, next time I'd be like, all right, this is what the price is. Mm-hmm. And then just kind of see. And then once people started being like, that's a lot, then I kind of was like, all right, I'm going to take a step back. Yeah. And this is where I'm going to be right now for the time being, until I feel like I fill up again. Then I'll raise the prices again. Then I'll see, you know, kind of see where I can go from there, and kind of, again, let the market tell me. But I'm still raising the prices. I'm in a comfortable enough spot to where I can let people walk. Like, I'm okay with letting people walk. Yeah,
because you have that, now that you have the demand, you have that little bit of ego inside your head. It's like, oh, wait, I am worth this much, and I have almost no more time left. Sorry, if anybody wants to jump in this spot, you have to pay me more. Yeah. So it's not like this bad perspective of ego. Yeah. It's like this good perspective of ego that, you know, dictates a very, very, but if you had a poor sense of ego, I know a couple tattoo artists who charged the same rates since they became, got out of their internship. And I'm like, you've been tattooing for like 8 years. Yeah. Like, at some point, are you going to raise your hourly rate? And they're like, maybe, you know, but other ones, they were like, They progressively got better, and they're like, no, fuck, look at my work. Look how good my work is. Yeah, absolutely. Pay me more. Yeah. and they deserved it.
Yeah, and I feel like what we're talking about is more of a realistic view of maybe having like a realistic ego. Mm-hmm. I think that if you had an ego that was maybe like a fragile ego, that would be never raising your prices, right? Never feeling like you were worth getting your prices higher, or raising your prices and being like upset when somebody wouldn't pay them. So, and being stuck to what your ego thinks you are, instead of coming back down to what is real.
Yeah.
Realistic.
And it's hard. It's that balance between the two, right? I mean, yeah, it's that constant. What is the old saying? I really like this one. I know it's cliche, and everybody's probably heard of it. It's the wolf you feed. There's an old, I think it's Native American parable. It's probably all over the world, but there's two wolves living inside of you. There's a black wolf and there's a white wolf, and one is good and happy and love and patience and all the good things, and the other one's the bad thing. And the more you feed one, the stronger the other one gets, and eventually, if it's big enough, it'll swallow the other one. So it's like that with your self-esteem, right? Like you can't but it's a little bit more complicated because you need that edge. I know people who are the sweetest, nicest people on the planet who won't take advantage of any opportunity if it could ever even remotely hurt somebody else. And they stay where they're at. They don't progress. They don't grow. They stay in the same position, and they get frustrated. And they're like, why is this happening? It's like, well, you have no bite.
Yeah.
You have to have a little bite.
Yeah. And I see when people do things like that, I like to really understand, like if somebody's okay with that, then I think that's really admirable. Like if
absolutely.
You're like, I'm like, but if somebody, like you said, if they're getting frustrated, then you got to be like, take a real look at yourself. Like, well, these are the things that you're doing. Are you more worried about inconveniencing people, or are you more worried about yourself growing?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I get when you're talking about that wolf thing.
Yeah.
I just immediately thought of Anchorman. I don't know if you remember, like, there's the guy Tino, and he's like tells this like weird. He's got like a Spanish accent, and he's like, where did I come from back home? They have a saying about you, Mr. Burgundy. It's when the wolf eats the young, his blood trickles down to all of his young, and he like goes nowhere with it, and he's like. Oh, okay, Tino. All right. This is the finest club owner in town.
I forgot about that scene.
I was just like thinking, I was like, where is this going to make sense?
That's the Portlandia guy, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is the Portlandia. I forgot it was him. Fred Armis something.
He's fucking hilarious. Hannah hasn't seen Portlandia.
Oh, it's a good fucking show.
I started saying some quotes the other day. I was like, put a bird on it. And she's like, what? And I was like, put a bird on it. Oh, you haven't seen Portlandia, have you? She's like, no.
It's so funny because as I watch that show, I start seeing things that are like, I'm like I do that. Like the real it's like the real cliche like hipster things.
So would you say that you're a hipster?
Oh yeah, I have
shit.
I have hips, of course. I have hipster-esque qualities. My cousin had the best quote that I ever heard. My cousin Nathaniel. He was like, "You're not a hipster, but 50% of your wardrobe is 100% hipster." I was like, okay, yeah. I think that's right.
That's funny.
Well, getting back to the ego, it's funny is today happened to be had something that checked my ego big time, and so I started teaching. I've been teaching since I was a blue belt, and it's because my wrestling. So I had other things that I could teach that were kind of beneficial, but a big self-conscious thing I always had was somebody being in my class that was a higher belt than me. So when I was a blue belt, I was really self-conscious about it, because I'm like, what do I have to teach this person? They're a purple belt, they're a brown belt. Then I wanted to be purple belt. I was like, okay, I feel a little better because most of the people at the gym that I teach, nobody's that high level, and then I got my brown. I felt a little better, but still, when there's like, if I know like somebody good's going to come to even another brown belt, I feel like a little apprehensive. And today I had Jackson, the guy, come down to class, and he wants to learn MMA, so I'm teaching him to do striking, and he wanted to stay after for the Nogi class. And he's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athlete. He's from Brazil, took second in worlds at brown belt, just received his black belt, and he, not just, but it was like earlier this year, and so he came down and trained. And another thing that I get self-conscious about is getting tapped while I'm teaching. I don't want to get tapped in a class that I'm teaching. And so it was a big ego check for me today. He came in, I taught the move, which was big for me because I was like, I wanted to like defer to him to teach because I'm like, what the fuck can I teach you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I taught a move anyways. We did a technique and we started rolling, and, he's tearing everybody up. And then I get around him with him. He taps me 3 times in 6 minutes,
Ooh.
And it's just, but it felt good. Like afterwards, like it was a really, really good experience. And it was just something that I've always been afraid of because I know my ego was afraid of it. And my ego was afraid of were in a place where I felt that I'm supposed to be the top person in the class, you know, and teaching everybody, I was really scared of them seeing that I wasn't. But after it happening, you know, everybody still values me just the same as I did before, probably even more now, you know what I mean, that I'm willing to do that. I know that I value myself more. I was really proud of myself for being able to do that and go through that. And I feel really good at the end of it for the whole situation.
Yeah, I get that. I'm a blue belt, so I get tapped all the time. So I don't know what that's like not getting tapped yet.
Well, yeah, it's not even the not getting tapped. It's like, I don't mind getting, if I go to like Romy's practice, or if I go somewhere else, like I get tapped. If I go to Peerless, I get tapped. I don't mind, but it's something about like a class that I'm teaching, you know?
Oh, yeah, I gotcha. And you're supposed to be the authority.
Yeah, it's something about, and the funny thing is, after I rolled with him, I rolled with another one of my students. He's really good. He's a blue belt, but he's a blue belt from 10th Planet, but he cross trains with us, and he ended up catching me today in a footlock. He's got really good footlocks. That's why I've been really enjoying rolling with him. And he caught me too. And I was like, well, fuck, I guess my ego's just getting really tested today. I was like, fucking fine. That's cool.
You're like, no, it's cool. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is, you know, now I guess we could call it the negative side's going to come up and be like, okay, I got to get better. No, I need to roll with you because I need to get better because I need to be able to handle you. I need to watch out for those things. It like pushes you. You're now getting that drive, that little edge. You're like, all right. But you're not like, I'm better than you. You know, like it's not to that extreme, but it pricks your ego a little bit to make you go, okay,
and
we have to get better.
And that's the ego too. You know, it's when you being afraid, or at least not enjoying to lose, is your ego is going to make you be better. Do the things that you need to do to be better. And so that's what what you said. If you didn't have an ego, you're just going to sit on the couch and you're not going to really give a fuck about what happens.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I'm actually going to turn this fan off.
Okay.
I just realized it was probably blowing into the mic the whole time. So if somebody was listening, if you guys are listening, it's like,
you guys would deal with it. It's fine. It's fine. You deal with it. Yeah.
Too funny.
But yeah, I think, I one of the things I really enjoy is just constantly like checking my ego and really doing the things that make me uncomfortable. When I could tell that it's something that I'm scared of, big thing I think happens with fragile ego is the not doing things because the fear of failure. And so if my ego is fragile to the point where if I fail, if that's going to break me and it's going to make me feel really bad, then I'll never try things. And then if you don't ever try things, you never know if you could do them. And if trying and failing breaks you, then you'll never get better at anything. Yeah. And so I'm just, one of my favorite things is checking my ego, is just doing whatever I can to make it, to knock it down a little bit, you know, then that way that we can build it back up, like knock it down.
Yeah, I have a different approach. I try to always build up my ego, but to not appear cocky. So that's like the balance for me, is that when I was younger, I used to have like no self-esteem. And then as I started getting older and having more success at different things, then I started getting cocky. And for me, I need that little bit more of, I'm confident, I can do this. No, you got it. You're an expert. You're leading in your field, blah, 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 all that stuff. But in the same sense, not come off as a fucking asshole, you know, because nobody likes those guys. Yeah. Nobody likes them. So for me, I try to like balance that out because my internal nature, I think, is naturally predisposed to having less confidence than more confidence. And there's probably a million reasons why that's the case, but that's where I'm at. So rather than push it aside, I allow it to come out, but then control how it's presented, because I can't control how other people always perceive me, but I can control myself. I can control, raising my voice, speaking down to people. Oh my God, that's a big one. I hate when I get spoken down to, or other people like get called boy or other things like that. You want to talk about pricking your ego. Someone's like, "Oh, hey boy." It's like, go fuck yourself. Like, don't call me that. Like someone you consider, it's one for me for whatever reason. If someone I consider my friend calls me buddy, like, "Hey buddy," I'm like, yeah. That's a weird one.
I'm like, oh, so we're not that good of friends, huh? I guess.
I have a friend who does that, and he's a really nice guy. And I realize it's just his, like, you know, how he speaks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna let that one go. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna.
A friend where you understand, like that's what they say. If you hear him say that to all their close friends, you're like, okay, all right, that's fine. You're not trying to be like, like.
But then that again is context, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one of those things you can't control how other people are going to perceive that. But for me, I try my damnedest never to speak down to somebody, and then I feel really, you know, I beat myself up quite a bit when I find out that I have spoken down to somebody, even though I didn't feel that way, they felt that way, and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, time to check the ego, bring it back a little bit, like what you did wasn't cool. So.
Yeah, and it's really easy to get to that point to where you talk down to somebody. One of the things that I've written down is, you know, when my ego starts running is when I start telling people just do this, you got to do this, or you got to stop doing this. And I'm kind of taking myself and I'm taking my knowledge as the authority. Like I know everything. And instead of just suggesting things, like, and being like, hey, maybe try this out. I'm just telling them, do this, you got to do this. This is the answer.
Mm-hmm. I actually have that sometimes at conferences because for whatever reason, sometimes I go to these business conferences and I hear somebody speak about a specific subject that I'm an expert on, and I hear it. I'm like, I hear what you're saying, but you're fucking wrong. Like that's going on in my head. And then it inevitably always happens that I get called out. Like someone says, does anybody have a question in the room? And I'm just sitting there. I'm not raising my hand. And for whatever reason, they always like, you sure you don't have a question? I'm like, I don't know if they saw my eye rolls during the conversation or what. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to lay you up, motherfucker. And I just like, give them the facts. While it's like, I have years and years of experience. Yeah. You should never do what this guy is telling you to do. You're kind of right in this category, but you're just trying to wrap it in a pretty package so everybody bites on it and he loves you and thinks you're the greatest, thing ever. And I hate when I do that.
Yeah.
I'm proud that I know the information. I hate when I get in those situations because I still haven't learned how to just say nope or
like, hey, like this is like almost like what the right thing to do is to acknowledge where they're going first and then say, well, this is what I think. But the problem is, like you said, like when you go like, never do this.
Yeah.
Because there's always,
it's global statements, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I'm learning from the book that you sent me, right? I'm learning like a lot of things when I'm learning to help out my relationship is my marriage. I gotta get used to saying that. But I mean, really, any relationship goes this way. Is like you said, those global statements, those things that are like always and never and every time and because there's never a never, right? There's never a never. Don't do this.
I'm sure I could call it. See, this is my ego.
But I mean, I honestly feel like it, like we could do this and you could say whatever is never. It is never right to murder somebody. So people who have been deployed in the military, right? Like that, but we justify that, right? So it's like there's really never a never. There's always some sort of circumstance where things could be,
I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, no, the ego's a funny thing. Have you come up with any tricks for yourself? I've got a few of my own, but I'm curious about yours, like how you kind of check that.
Yeah, well, I check it by, I don't know, you saw the last blog that I wrote. One of the big things is like I like to ask myself really tough questions that I know that like when I ask them, I could tell that if something I don't want to answer, it's something that I need to check my ego with.
Can you give me an example? I'm curious. I guess I don't understand entirely.
Well, fuck. I have a few written down. So I know one that I put in the blog. One was, what have you done this week that you're proud of? And it kind of makes me think like, fuck, have I done anything that I'm proud of? I'm sitting here thinking that I'm good and I don't need to really do anything. But is there anything that like what have I done this week that I'm proud of? What else do I have?
By the way, your blogs are awesome.
Thank you.
So we do the podcast for people who are new on YouTube. We do the podcast every other week. And then between those weeks, we do tons of posts on social media. And then Mike does a blog every other week, the week we are not having the podcast. And they're fucking hilarious. But they're also insightful too. So, but
Thanks,
I like
man.
the little things you add in there, like the little humor to keep me going. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
that was good.
I really enjoy writing the blogs because it's really like I'll ask people to look at it and see what they think, and sometimes they'll say certain things I like critiques to help me with it, but it's really important to me that I'm talking in a way that I'm really comfortable. I'm writing in a way that I'm really comfortable, and where it sounds like I could be talking. And if I say a joke that you don't get, like, I'm sorry, you know what I mean? But for people like you, like, where you get it, it's funny, you know, and it's fine. Like I'm really being myself, and I really enjoy writing these things.
Yeah.
But so here's just a couple questions real quick that I have. So one is, why should they listen to you? So if I'm, whatever, like if I'm doing, say maybe I'm teaching, or maybe I'm telling somebody something that I have heard. One of the things that I do is I regurgitate things that somebody's told me, but I haven't checked into it. Right. And I tell them this thing, and I could tell this is my ego, because I tell them this thing and I feel good because I told them something they didn't know, and I'm giving them knowledge, and it feels good. But then if you think, like, why should they listen to you? What reason do they have to listen to you? So that's one. One is the one I told you this one. If everyone in the world was exactly like you, would it be a better place?
I love this question.
So that one I still haven't gotten to that. That's a big one to tackle. And then the other one is, why do you want to lead? So this is, I constantly write them down. So this could be because I think sometimes people want to lead. They want to be leaders because they want for the wrong reasons. I think sometimes we want to lead for the wrong reasons. I think the best thing, what I try to do mostly, is I try to sit back, demonstrate my knowledge on, like, if I'm in a group setting, sit back, do something to demonstrate my knowledge to the extent that I have it, and not try to go above and not try to
Showboat.
Showboat or puff up or say anything, like, kind of, go further than what is in my spectrum. And then everybody can decide who the leader is, right? Like, I think everybody just kind of demonstrates their value, and then you see who in this particular setting, this person has the best, like the highest value here. And yeah, it's kind of hard when I think there's personalities who want to lead in everything, regardless of what they know in the situation, their expertise on it.
It's that definition of the alpha male kind of, it's bullshit, but still, it's that definition.
It's kind of like the difference between type A and type B kind of.
Yeah, type A, type B, alpha male, those kind of things. Yeah, it's common in our linguistics for sure. We love to throw those terms in there. Yeah. There are those people, but I don't know. For me, it's like you said. I actually always I use global statement.
Yeah, that's right.
I almost always love when I'm in like class settings or group settings or things like that, and they're like, "Okay, pick a leader from the group." I always sit back. If they don't, if people aren't like, "Oh yeah, you lead it," I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like I'm more happy when that happens than when I assert myself. I'm like, "Oh, make me the leader." It's like those moments. And then it's the worst when they're like, probably not.
Yeah, when you get there and you realize that you should, like, other people know more than you, you're like, shit, I don't know what to do here.
I should have sat down.
Yeah. And it's like, and then if nobody's taking charge, then you kind of, that's when I'll start being like, well, I'll suggest things like, well, hey, maybe this and this. Well, hey, maybe let's try this. And then at that point, usually people go like, okay, well, you seem like you have a few good ideas, so maybe you should just lead it now.
Yeah.
I think well, what do you like to do for,
So I mentioned how I can't always control how other people perceive me, but it helps me understand how I'm projecting myself if I ask the closest people around me. And these are the people I really trust. And I've mentioned this on the social media before, maybe in the podcast as well, but I like to take little retreats. And I'll go to Joshua Tree, Big Bear, something like that, somewhere far away, preferably no Wi-Fi. If there's no cell reception. That's even better. And before I go out, I will send out this email to all my closest people I absolutely trust. And I'll say, hey, I'm just doing some self-evaluation over the weekend. I'd love for you to just give me a little snippet of how you perceive me. Good, bad, just let me know how you perceive me. I'm not asking for judgment calls. I kind of am, but I'm not asking them specifically to, it's not only so that I like change things about me, but maybe I change the way I present information. The new people who are brought into my circle, who just in my closest circle, who I send these out, they're afraid to say anything negative about me. But the closest ones, they have no fucking problem. They're like, all right, motherfucker, here we go. Finally. I was waiting all year for this. But it's very helpful. It's incredibly helpful because I've learned so much about how I present myself towards other people that allows me to like, oh, I don't think that, I don't feel that way, but this action is presenting a likelihood of myself that is not representative of who I am. So I need to kill that. Like, and it's not so much I care about what everybody else thinks. No, these are very, very close people. They know me very well. If the rest of the world thinks I'm an asshole, but my closest people realize, no, like Josiah isn't. I'm cool. I'm cool. But it's important. I think it's important. I think it's a harder question to ask someone else. And I don't always take what everybody says to me. There's like maybe 6-8 people on this list. I don't take every single person's judgment and self-internalize it and change everything about my action just based off what they see. But it does, if I see a recurring pattern among them, I'm like, oh, okay, this is probably very likely true.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's not like you may not be coming off this way or thinking this way, but it may come off that way. And a lot of times the intentions don't match what the action is or what the effects on other people are. And I remember this is one thing that I wrote down because this is one thing that I do, and it relates with my ego. And when somebody tells a story, I automatically like what I'm going to tell. I'm like, hey, I remember when you sent me that text when you were out there. So I want to put myself in other people's stories, and I realize I do it all the time. And I'm only going to do it right now. But but I remember when this last time you were out in Joshua Tree and you sent me that text, and initially I saw it and I was like, initially I just wanted to be like, oh no, you're good. Like that's what that's what I want to do. And then I was like, no. And then I realized like, no, like this is important. I knew that you were reaching out. I knew it was important to you. I knew you wanted like the real stuff. So I was like, okay, well, then I was like really sitting there thinking like, what can I say that, I don't know. I'm just thinking something that might be significant or something that might be important that I'm doing you justice as your friend. That's what I was really thinking there. But I remember you doing that. I remember that thinking it was super admirable, and
sometimes sucks.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine. So what I can imagine is, I imagine asking the question is hard, but not as hard as seeing some of the answers. And I imagine that seeing some of the answers can be tough, and that's gotta be a lot. Like, and that's a big ego check. That's a great ego check. I love it, man. Like, there's a lot of things that I've seen you do that I have taken note of and thinking like I would really like to do that as well.
I appreciate that. Yeah. That's boosting my ego.
I'm well, but for me, it's in a realistic way. Like it's something that I think that you should feel good about, and I want you to feel good about. And I want you to know that there are those things that you've done that I've taken value from, and I think that's a good thing.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course, man.
Yeah, I see you do a lot of things too, like your questions, and I saw in your blog, and it's also something I noticed that can really alter your perception or your external perception of your ego to others is your community, right? Like the people you surround yourself around. Like if you find one guy and then you see his friend and then his other friend and his other friend, and you start seeing them all hang around each other, you notice like, oh shit, you all act like this. This is a mutual behavior between all of you. And you'll see almost the same ego level. Like there will always be that one person that has the highest ego and one person who has the lowest. I'm sure you can think in your group of friends, like which ones that is immediately right off the bat.
Yep. I'm sure you can as well. Or thinking of the same, probably thinking of the same person.
Same person.
Fucking Brandon.
Motherfucking Brandon. Oh, he gets a shout out almost every episode. Oh my God. But you see like this, if the max ego is here and the lowest ego is here within the group of friends, you'll find like they're within this like range or this range or this range, right? Like they're within a window of that range with each other. So I find it's incredibly important to choose who you're around. And sometimes that means not completely ghosting on certain friends, but if you find somebody who has like this stupid big ego and then you realize you have a second friend who has a stupid big ego and you're like, oh, fuck, maybe I shouldn't be spending so much time with all these guys. I'm not saying to like completely ghost them, but maybe reevaluate your environment with these people.
You start separating yourself a little bit.
I'll see you once a month versus every single week.
Yeah.
Like, or I'll see you, once a year instead of multiple times a year. Like just reduce that amount so that, that influence on yourself is reduced. It's sometimes by pulling yourself away and then they're like, hey dude, I haven't seen you in a while. I'm like, yeah, I missed you too, but I've been focusing on other things. And they're like, yeah, what happened? And then you can be like, okay, you let them know. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
And it can possibly influence them to alter behavior. And you can be that catalyst for that change within that group. I've seen it happen.
It's a scary thing to do though.
Oh,
because it could be something that they're like, wow, okay, I appreciate you telling me that, or it could be something like "fuck you," like
it could go either way.
Fucking, I don't give a fuck what you think. And that's a sign of a fragile ego, right there. Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking? It's funny. So I just realized it when we're talking is maybe I've always thought of myself as somebody who has a pretty low self-esteem, and that's why I started doing a lot of things that I do, wrestling. That's why I started fighting and stuff and doing these things. And I'm thinking now, since I've gone so long with checking my ego and making sure I want to be at a realistic place with my ego, I think I've gotten to the point where my ego is actually strong enough to take that, and maybe I have a higher self-esteem than I'm aware of. I'm thinking because a lot of people can't really take that ego check very well, and they say, like, kind of like you said, like you're compensating for a low self-esteem, so you go a little bit higher. So maybe because I'm able to sit in this spot where it's a little bit below the upper echelon of the ego, maybe that means that my self-esteem is a little bit higher than what it used to. Maybe it's a little bit higher than what most people's. I don't know. This is just something I'm realizing like right now, but I have a very anti-fragile ego, I think. And you see that of how
anti-fragile ego.
So anti-fragile is something that doesn't, so there's fragile, there's anti-fragile, there's robust. Fragile is something that breaks, right? Like you drop a glass, it breaks.
Right.
Robust is something like a piece of rubber or a piece of plastic. You drop on the ground, it's not going to break.
Right.
But it's not going to give or anything. Something that's anti-fragile is something that maybe is going to give a little bit, but it's going to come back stronger.
Oh.
And it's kind of, it's like what we are. It's like our bones, our muscles, everything. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what anti-fragile is. And that's what, kind of feel like what I've done to my ego for, since I was a teenager. Like I told you, I started having these self-realizations for whatever reason at a very young age. And I started really challenging myself at a pretty young age. And maybe all those cracks, all these cuts and cracks I put to my ego has made it a strong thing.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. Yeah, I probably have done a similar tactic myself. I don't know if mine's quite anti-fragile right now. I think your life events can really alter your perspective one way or the other. Something really damaging to your ego or really, boosting of your ego can really change that, right? Like you just get your next belt rank and your ego's through the roof. You're like, yeah. Or somebody's like, oh shit, now I'm going to get fucked up now. And, depending on that, your internal perspective of that, it could alter your entire perspective of your internal ego. But that's why I like those questions, like both your internal questions that you do for yourself and the questions I do for myself on like every 6 months or every 3 months that I send it out to everybody, because it really, we're really good at lying to ourselves. I think that was a different blog you wrote.
Yeah.
Like,
I've written that in like 2 or 3. That's like something that I would like reoccur.
Yeah.
Put in there.
And that's part of the ego too. It's like that protection of our self-identity, right? We lie to ourselves and say that we're amazing or that we can do anything or all that different stuff. And sometimes that's helpful and sometimes it's not. Yeah. But for me, I, in the past, have made judgment calls for myself on my own internal actions that haven't been entirely accurate. So I don't always, I'm coming to a point where I trust myself a little bit more than I always trust the people around me, but I definitely place a heavy weight on the people's perception around me, because like I was saying earlier, I may have a different internal perspective of myself, but how I'm coming off is truly how what really matters. Yeah. It's deconstruction theory, I think they call it. I've mentioned it before, where it's, once, you put words on a page of paper and you hand it to somebody, or you draw some art and you hand it to somebody, we do this podcast and we send it out. Our ability to control what this says to somebody else is completely diminished, right? Like, it's in the perception of the individual from their experiences, their life. It takes on a life of its own as far as its own individual perception.
And that's fucking beautiful, because I love it. I don't know if you do the same thing as me, but when I listen back to the podcast, I'm always like, fuck, I should have said that there. Yeah. But I think it's really awesome to just, like you said, we just send it out. And then I really like the fact that I have no influence on what people are how their perspective of what we're saying is, right? We say what we say. We can't sit there and be like, pause, like, what I meant by this was this and this. Look out for this. Like, they just listen to it, and you just have to let it be.
Let it be. Yeah, it's difficult. I think that's been one of the great things I love about this podcast is we say things, later we re-listen to it, because how often do you record yourself and then listen to your conversation you had with somebody else over again, And I mentioned this before, is that sometimes when I edit the podcast, I'll listen to, because I'm editing it, it takes like 3 or 4 times that I cycle through it that I get to hear myself say things over and over again. And I've noticed certain habits and traits and conversation styles and interrupting, like that's a big one we've had, where this self-perception gets
this podcast has been an ego check. It's for the best, for the better. I think it's made us much better, much more considerate conversationalists. Yeah,
in some ways, it's made me more confident in myself for things that we say and do, and how we've helped people, and how people communicated the past episodes, and how much it's helped them deal with specific topics. And other ways, it's been like, you're not the shit, Josiah. You think you are, but you need to chill out a little bit, And
that's one of the biggest dangers of ego. And it's like what you just said, and you said it a little bit earlier, is getting to the point where you become disillusioned with yourself. I think that's something that's probably one of my biggest fears when it comes to my ego, is being disillusioned with myself, and starting to label myself with desirable labels that are not true.
Mm-hmm.
Like say maybe like
mm-hmm.
I don't know, like something as simple as like, I'm a great driver, or I'm a really grateful person, or I always do the right thing, and like things like that. Like when you start labeling yourself, and I know I do it to myself, like with these like really desirable traits, like I say like, I'm a really logical person, and like saying stuff like that, like as true as it might be, it's just I don't find the benefit in doing that for myself. And maybe that's because of what I said. Maybe I'm so comfortable with myself that I don't need to hear these things. Like I don't need to know that I'm good at these things, where I'm comfortable enough with myself. Like I don't have any weird thoughts of, doing dangerous things to myself, because I have I feel worthless, and I know people do. So that can be the scary thing as well. Like people, not everybody can do these things. Not everybody can can attack their ego and, and crash it down and crack it open and constantly beat it. Sometimes people need it to be raised up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that made me think about what you're talking about, it's the self-examining your own life, right? Like Socrates, I think he said it, an unexamined life is not worth living. And what we say?
I love it.
Yeah, it's for me. I heard, and it kind of connected with a different episode I listened from Tim Ferriss. I forget the gentleman's name. He's I think he's a political statistician. He wrote the Flywheel book. I forget his name. We'll post in the link, the podcast. But he talked about writing scores for his days, like +3 to -3. And he did different stats, and he I think he only did it for his work and something else. But for me, I kind of came up with my own system based off of that, where I check my emotion, my sleep the night before, my relationship with Hannah, my focus, and my work day. And then from that, I get a quality score of my day. So rather than say, this was a shitty day, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, 2 of the 4 or 5 things were shitty, but the rest were amazing. That does not equal a shitty day. So I call it day score. And by doing this, it's really helped me reevaluate a good day versus a bad day. It can, because each one can have down to -3 all the way up to +3. So, my emotional state could be, it's rare that I hit a +3, right? But I hit a 1 and a 2 pretty frequently, right? And when I hit a 0, I'm like, it was kind of a wash emotion day, or, work was a wash emotion day. But, hitting those -3s on a consistent basis, that's that examining. It's like, okay, like in my emotional state, maybe I might even do next year, add in ego, add in a ranker for ego and checking my own ego. But it's important that, what I'm hearing from what you're saying is to check yourself. Whatever method that you choose or you want to do or how you want to do it, just check yourself. Just find, and it's stats, right? You can lie to yourself, but I do this at the end of every single day. If I missed it that night and I wake up the next morning, I don't redo the scores from the next day, because my perception of that day has been internalized and changed completely, right? I do it at the end of the day because everything's happened. I can see just that day and only that day. I didn't get sleep, so that my brain's working better. Nothing's influencing it, just the end of that day. Yeah. And then now I'm less likely to lie to myself. So again, it is my own perception of it.
It's a really good one, though, because what immediately I would think of is that you may write down like emotionally today was a -3, but then you write down that everything else was a 1 and a 2 and a couple 3s, like positives. You're like, oh wow, man, I guess my day wasn't so bad, and it can kind of change how you're feeling, and that's what I really like that. That's a really cool thing to do.
Yeah. I've done similar methods, of tracking. I really like my bullet journal. There's a million resources online to how to do a bullet journal. You just YouTube it or Google it, and you'll find a million different features. And everybody's got a little bit different things. Benjamin Franklin had one. Tim Ferriss does it. A bunch of people do it, but you can customize it to yourself, to the things you want to track and focus on. And I really feel like ego would be a good one on that list. I think tracking your perception of the ego, I don't know how it would be, because you have to define it, right? Like, because negative could be either negative, I was too egotistical, or too passive, right, with your ego. So I'd have to figure out that one.
Yeah.
But that'd be cool.
Yeah. I thought of a metaphor. Oh, I before I get to the metaphor, it's so cool that you're so much like me, and maybe it probably has a lot to do with us being men, but I've heard people tell me like, well, I don't know why you want to measure everything, like why do you want to track everything, and like in my head I'm like, why would you not want to track it? Like, and I guess it goes back to what I said. I never said that out loud, but a huge fear of mine is becoming disillusioned with myself. So I want to really see what the real thing is there and understand it. And I was thinking of a metaphor for what maybe an ego, like a good way to look at what an ego is. And maybe you think of like a water balloon, right? And you have a certain amount of water is what your ego is. So maybe that water is in that balloon and maybe it's filled up with air to be a little bit bigger than it should be, and then, but that water is in there kind of swishing around, or right there's too much water in that balloon for like, if your ego is a little bit smaller, right? And that balloon can't hold on to what that water is and what you actually are, right? And you're thinking a lot less of yourself and what you are. And that's when it bursts from the water, you overflow.
Yeah, you can either burst from the air or the water. Is either or. It
either
can
the
be
fluff or the substance.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's interesting. I like that. Yeah. That's a really good analogy, actually.
Yeah, just came to me. Wrote it down.
Boom, like, hey. Right there.
Yeah. My ego just got a little bigger.
Yeah. I do want to talk about this too. When I was talking about the council or the people that I have around me, I call them the council, that I asked the question. The council. I know, self-grandizing. But it's really important to pick people you trust. You pick somebody who isn't right they're super depressed or they're super negative or that they don't have your best interest in mind, and you ask that person and then you try to reevaluate like their perspective of what they said to you. It can fuck you up. Yeah. It can really fuck you up. Yeah. So I highly recommend like taking some time and selecting those people, really gathering good people. And if you only have 2 people that are good, that's enough. Done.
Better ask 2 valuable people than to ask 10 people who are going to give the wrong feedback.
And there are times, sometimes I'll pick somebody who's new to my circle that I trust, but don't. I want to see what a new person perceives, because there's history from all the old, the people that have been in my life for a long time. So somebody, the new people, it's like, okay, so this is the new perception of me, because we change and we evolve, but I don't know about you, but sometimes when I have friends, I think about the old days. I think about how we first became friends, and that's kind of like this contained identity that I want to keep of that person, but they expand and change and mold, and you sometimes forget that about them. So picking new people and having them reevaluate you, that's a good idea too.
Yeah, I've had to realize recently not a few, but like one in particular, one of my best friends that like growing up was one of my best friends. It's now like, like when we see each other, it's not just, we've grown, we're very different people, like I've gone one way, and I think my group of friends, my immediate friends are going the same way, and they're going the opposite way, or maybe just sitting still, and that's where I get, there's quite a few. That's mostly when I not really cut ties, but I lose, friendships, not lose, I don't know what to say, but like
I know
you just don't hang out with people as much, is because I feel like I'm going in a certain way, and that they remain the same. And if it's somebody that I haven't seen, like it's a friend with somebody for 10 years and they've remained the same for 10 years, it's just not going to feed me. It's not going to fuel me at all at that friendship.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
It just happens. But going back to what you were saying about about picking the right people to ask, I think that's really important. You have to really be sure too that you're not picking people because you want to pick selfless people. Like you said, people have your best interest in mind, instead of they're not saying like, oh, like you don't help out enough, because really they just want, they want you to do everything for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. It can be tough. It can be tough.
Yeah. I totally ripped this idea off from Tim Ferriss, so this is not an original idea. But it's definitely one of those ones that has really improved my self-perception and how I check my ego. So I highly recommend it. That's probably the best way for me. Self-meditation, I think, is a good one. Headspace is an awesome app. I've used that to help, because the more you're connected with your body mentally, the better you are able to recognize emotions as they come up and kind of check them in the moment. Headspace has a million different playlists for different types of meditation on focus, anger, confidence. Just a long list of different types of meditation strategies and styles, and it's really good. So I recommend that too.
Yeah. That's something that I'm just, I just haven't I believe in the power of meditation. I just haven't. It's not something I've really implemented into my life very much yet.
Yeah, it's not easy. I would go like back before I got the app. It would probably be once every other month I would meditate, and then when I got the app, on a good week I'll meditate 4 to 5 times a day. A week, and or to like the lowest 2 or 3. But that's still like just by getting this app, the amount of meditation is just it's worth the money for me. But it is definitely one of those things that is like, yeah, I'm terrible at meditating. I'm not, like sitting still for a long period of time doesn't sound fun.
Yeah. And that's the point of it, though. I love those challenges, and those are challenges to your ego. What you want to do. That's one of the things that I've realized is that I have become really my attention span has gotten a lot shorter. So like with my workouts, like I don't like doing long workouts, and I've realized that that's a bad thing because if I don't like doing a long workout and I just want to get it done short, I'm used to everything being short. So if I do a fight or if I do a jiu-jitsu match or anything and it goes long, I'm going to be wanting it to be over, sooner than it should. And I might do something stupid to get myself out of there, and I might end up losing,
Yeah.
And just because I don't want to be, because I'm over it, my attention span isn't there. And I think going back to both of our ways of asking questions, like you asking like your closest friends questions, me asking myself questions, kind of goes to who do you trust? And I think it's beneficial to do both of them. But
I agree.
But do you trust yourself enough to ask yourself those questions and get the right answer? And if you don't, or maybe even if you do, maybe you trust people around you more to give you the correct answer. And you just got to really be honest with yourself and who you trust.
I think if I'm being honest, I ask myself bigger questions about long-term goals and strategies and, skills and, trying to improve myself in different areas. But I think I spend less time asking myself those questions, which I'm realizing as you're telling me is like, you should ask yourself. I think I do trust myself. I just, I like that extra filter. And I don't know why I haven't. I used to ask myself almost exclusively, those questions. But I think maybe, along the way, there were some mistakes that I made. And that was a damage to my ego, right? Like it was, okay, you obviously can't be trusted. You're on timeout.
Yeah.
Let other people help you out a little bit until you get back on your feet. And I think maybe as far as my ego is concerned, I'm probably back there. Like you said, that maybe more of that anti-fragile ego, where people tell me things that are true about myself or their perception about it all the time. And I'm like, meh. Okay, cool. I'll take it with a grain of salt. Or I realize, you've only seen this side of me. Like you haven't seen me outside of a work setting or outside of a podcast setting or outside of a jiu-jitsu setting. Like you've only seen me in this environment. So that's your perception of who I am. That's why you said that. And I'm able to, make that connection between their environment. One of the things from the book, Getting the Love You Want that you're reading is about that perception, right? Like it's always going to be easier to just, how do I say this? It's easier to make those judgment calls, but you have to take time to, I'm not saying this very well. I know. So you want to make sure that you're spending time with the other person, getting to know them and being curious with the person. That's what I was trying to say, is not always trying to view them as your, through your lens, through they're an extension of you. They're not. You have to stay curious with your partner, and you have to continually realize they have a different perspective and view of themselves and of the world and of you than you do of them. Like they're going to have a different perspective, and you have to stay curious about your partner because they're going to be changing. It's that part that I was talking about earlier where everybody is constantly changing, but you have this stamped like on their forehead. This is who you are. You will never change. Thank you. You know?
Stay the same for me, please. Okay.
Yeah. Stay the same. That'd be great. I mean, isn't that a major reason why a lot of relationships fail is because they were one way, right? And then they start to grow and change and get comfortable or whatever. You fall apart and you're like, you weren't the person I married. No shit.
Would you like me to be? Because I don't want you to be that person. Yeah.
No shit. They're not the same person. They grew up. Like, yeah. So.
Yeah. And I think judging, that's one thing that I'm very guilty of, is judging people based off of my experience of life and what I think. I know that I think this in my head, like what I know to be, like what I think to be correct is almost like what I know to be correct. You know, like, hey, like they shouldn't be talking that way to me, or they shouldn't be talking that way to that person. Like that's really rude.
Yeah.
You know? And then instead of me saying it or maybe trying to understand the way that they're doing it or even tell them maybe that came off rude, I just think in my head, like that person's rude from now on. That person is a rude person. But I have a really, and I started thinking, that book got me thinking back to how I grew up. And I grew up just with my dad, him and I. He's a quiet person. He's very logical. He doesn't look for like ecstatic things to like highly pleasurable things. Like he just kind of likes to do his thing, same thing every day, and don't express a lot of like love, you know, like and it's that's how I grew up. And that's how I've become. And I kind of, in my head, I think that everybody should be that way.
Yeah.
And that's an ego thing. It's a huge ego thing, you know, and that's a cause to many of me and my wife's fights. Many of them.
That never happens to me. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's that imago. That's one of the things the book talks about, is that you try to seek out a partner that is like this blended perspective of your caretaker. And that can be, you know, a stepdad, a stepmother, your actual parents, but it's like a merge of them, the needs that you wanted as a child or that you missed out. And that's the person you go out and you find. So when you say, oh, you married your mother, not entirely true. You probably married a merge of your mother and your father, right? Like that's generally the identity of who we marry. I can absolutely see that about me and Hannah can see the same thing with me. But it's interesting. It's a good book. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. So again, the book is Getting the Love You Want by Harville. Do you remember his last name?
Oh no.
Harville
We'll
something.
link it.
Kathy
You guys,
something.
yeah, if you guys want it, we'll just it's our favorite phrase in the podcast.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, if you were to put maybe like say you're grading, just like you put a value on your day. If you were to put a value right now on your ego, how would you value it?
Oh man, you go first.
On my ego, I think I would grade it at a 1.
A 1?
Because I would like to be, one of my biggest weaknesses is kind of my view of myself and being like in my head, it's like too realistic with what I could do. Like I just see the black and white, like, hey, say I'm going to do a jiu-jitsu thing. And I say, like we were just talking about earlier, I'm doing the Ultimate Mat Warriors in September. And there's guys and I'm the only brown belt in there and everybody else is black belt. So I'm thinking like, yeah, I won't win this. Like, so I
gotcha.
And it's like, sometimes I really, in that aspect, I envy the people who are disillusioned with themselves. Who like I would see certain people when they go into fights, and I'm like, dude, this guy's way. They're like, and like, but you could see in the way they talk that they don't see it at all. They're like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm gonna go out there, and like they're not scared of anything. And I'm like, man, that is really admirable. Like just to,
it's probably not true, but that's very admirable.
But if you're going to go into something like that, you almost have to be that way.
Yeah,
you have to really believe in yourself, or else there's no point. Mm-hmm. You can defeat yourself before you ever start.
Very true.
And I've gotten, it's weird. I've gotten really good at proving my lack of belief in myself, like proving myself wrong. Like there are times to where I don't believe myself and it becomes proven true, right? And probably because I didn't believe in myself, I underperformed. But there are times where I don't believe in myself and I will have some success in some point and I'll overachieve and I'll be like, oh, wow. And then I could see my self-actualization and perspective of myself like growing within the moment of it. And then by the end of it, like I proved myself wrong. And at the end of it, like I'm feeling really good about myself because of what I've proven to myself.
Yeah, I'd probably have to put myself at a 1, 2 for business reasons and things like that. I'm definitely one of the leading experts in the area for my field. I have all these, great accolades and things like that, but the reality is that I don't always get the results that I'm looking for, even though I know that I'm qualified, and sometimes I second guess myself quite a bit. But I'm also not to the point where I'm like in the negatives or in the zeros, like I know that I'm worth something. I've got strong self-esteem, but I'm also not to the point where I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll I'll do anything I want to do, I'm just not there. So, I'd say 1 is a fair assessment for myself.
It seems like it's probably a healthy place to be.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad spot. I almost wonder if with that scale, 0 is better than +3 or -3, right?
Yeah, it depends.
There's a way that, like, we haven't really established how this thing should be.
That's what I was thinking when I was answering. I was thinking, like, it depends on what we're talking about as far as what the ego is because 0 could be the place you want to be, right? That's like the middle ground, the place, like that's where the water fills up the balloon perfectly, right?
Yeah.
But you go a little bit high, and then
so maybe that would be a way to do it. Is negative? Maybe we should redo it. -3 is like, really low self-esteem, and +3 is too much self-esteem. So I don't even know if it could go in the same category of the day score thing that I do, because it almost mess up because it's a positive and negative.
If we're scoring it that way, I would probably put myself at like a -1. Like if we're looking at if we're thinking of,
it's a much better way of doing this. I actually like this.
If we're thinking of a balloon filled with water, right, and we're thinking about it, everything above 0 is air. Everything below 0 is the water. It's like too much water, and 0 is perfectly filled up. I would say I put myself at like a -1.
I would say I'm probably a +1 then. I still have that little bit of that ego sure. Yeah. A little bit more air than water. Yeah.
But it's super. What's really important is for us to be honest with ourselves about it, to know. And if what we're looking for is a 0, we kind of both know. The cool, I think it's a really, they're both really healthy places to be, because it's always nice to have work to go towards. If you get yourself to a 0, very shortly you're going to go to a 1 or a -1, like because you're going to stop. Like
exactly.
It's hard to stay there.
I'm perfect. Oh shit, my ego just went
exactly. Yep, exactly. It's there's a really cool stat that I like to think about, and it was on basketball teams, and they were saying that statistically the team, like if they're within a certain point range, the team who is losing at halftime statistically goes on to win. Because they have something to play for. And it's like us being a -1 and you being a +1. We have something to play for. We have something to aim for. So we're working towards that instead of being at a 0 and just letting off and falling back or down.
We'd end up where we're at.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think I have seen that in a lot of sports where teams are down like a point, or they're tied and they're like, okay, let's fucking bring it.
You get that feeling. Like I've watched a lot, like certain sports, and you get that feeling when somebody's losing, but you just feel like they're gonna win. Like you don't feel like you could watch basketball. You see it a lot in hockey. I see it a lot in hockey where you see, like, there'll be a team that's down, maybe it's like 2-1 or 2-0, but the team that has 0 has like 30 shots on goal, and the team that has 2 has like 15 shots on goal. So you're like, okay, the tides are going to turn, because like obviously this other team is dominating the area, and they have something more to play for. They don't feel like they're out of it, but
no, that's cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like we dove pretty good into that.
I agree.
It was cool. I was actually able to figure things out as we were talking. I learned some things just from hearing your perspective on it, and it was pretty cool.
Likewise. Yeah. And it was also interesting with the video. So
I was doing my best to forget about you guys.
Yeah. I realized getting up for the fan or getting up to check the camera. I was like, those are things I used to do on the podcast and nobody would notice. But now it's like, oh, I have to tell people you're watching.
No more bathroom breaks and stuff in between.
Like one person goes to the bathroom, the other one keeps talking, and nobody has any clue that the other person is completely left
I'm sure it's pretty obvious. I'm sure they could tell.
Boss.
Seems a little forced. Like you're in their bathroom. I'm forcing it too. Like.
It's like Josiah's talking a little longer than normal. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyways,
but this was fun. This was a good experience. It was really cool to be able to talk with you again, man.
Yeah,
I really
likewise.
I enjoy these episodes a lot.
Me too.
Next time we'll get some good guests on here for the next couple for you guys, and but we just wanted to. This is for us. I hope you guys like it, but this was for us to hang out and enjoy each other's company.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about when we wanted to start this podcast. Is I'm truly doing this because I enjoy conversations with you, with our friends, with people we know or meet, and we're just gonna do what's fun for us. If you guys love it, that's awesome. Like, we really enjoy it, but this is a lot for us that we get to just share. But I am incredibly grateful when, we do something that really inspires or impacts or helps somebody. So if there's something that, you're interested in, we've gotten previous comments and we've asked certain people, different topics and things like that. And they're on the list. So we've got a few saved up from some of you followers that have messaged us. So if you have a topic, share it with us. There's some topics we're just not gonna do. Like, what was it? Aliens. Like, we got 1 4-star review on iTunes, and he's like, "When are you going to talk about Bob Lazar?" I was like, "We're probably."
Yeah, sorry, man. Sorry, I watched the documentary like halfway through, and that's about all I know. So
I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and but really, if you guys have one of the biggest things that I'm really grateful for is when any of you guys reach out to us on the page or me individually and let me know how something that has really helped you, or even something that you guys have a criticism on or a critique. And if you have a question, if you need help with something, it's a pleasure of mine. I've had a few people reach out to me and ask me things, and I'm more than happy to write you back a full essay response about, if you have questions about anything, and I enjoy it. It's not a burden to me whatsoever. So I would really appreciate any feedback, any messages. We love them. We love them.
Yeah, it's likewise. We love sharing. One of the things we have is just all this time that we spent learning and gathering information. And so when someone asks us something, we're like, yes.
Yeah.
And we like Mike said, we can send paragraphs.
Yeah.
So marketing, health, mental tips, focus, meditation, life. Like we're willing to talk about any of that.
Yeah. And that's before we sign off, I want to go back to what we were talking about meditation earlier. And I think it's really important to, I've seen problems with meditation to where people meditate and they wonder why it doesn't work. But I think meditation has to go hand in hand with physical activity. And if you're doing one without the other, I think that, if you're meditating and you're not doing any physical activity, I think that the stress within your body and the pent up energy in your body is not going to get released through that meditation. So, and one thing that my wife has said that was working for her the other day was breath work. So the physical aspect of it was sometimes the breath work can be more important than the meditation, the mind work.
Yeah.
And you got to maybe do one before the other.
Yeah. Hannah does that. She speaks highly of it. So, all right.
Cool.
Well, thank you guys. We love you.
Yeah.
And
I love you.
I love you too.
All right.
See you guys.
All right. Bye guys.